You're listening to the Book Talk Today podcast, a podcast that inspires readers to obtain valuable insights to inform, educate, and improve lives. My name is Orn Abdi. I'm an avid reader, best known for the creation of the 1 Minute Book Review community, and I'm sitting down with authors to delve deeper into the books they have written to uncover the story behind the story. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 32 of the Book Talk Today podcast. Today we are joined by Todd Herman. Todd is an author, speaker and coach and has been entrenched in the world of elite performers, working with the highest achievers in sports and business for over 2 decades. Today we'll be discussing his book, The Alter Ego Effect, The Power of Secret Identities to Transform Your Life. Todd, it's a pleasure to have you on.
I'm excited to finally be on Book Talk Today with Orn Abdi. I mean,
there we go.
I might be more starstruck.
I appreciate that. So from reading the book, I think you're, as we discussed briefly a second ago, you're enlightened to the fact of alter egos. And as you reflect, I'm obviously a passionate reader, and I'm sure you are as well. In the book, you reference many different philosophical ways of thinking and a lot of books as well. And I think that the term of an alter ego, or the concept, has been around for a long period of time, and It was a great way that you described it, bringing contemporary society with sports people and athletes and other people that we know, whether they be entertainers as well. So before we get into the descriptions of an alter ego and what it is and how to define it and how we create our own, I think it would be good for the listeners to hear about your journey to discovering the alter ego for yourself and how that formed.
Yeah. So, look, we were talking about this before. When I was going around meeting with all the different publishers about the book, if you don't know the publishing space very well, for the average listener, if you get a meeting with 1 to 2 publishers, nowadays there's self-publishing, which is really, and I'd actually recommend most people would probably go self-publishing because you don't need the traditional publishers as much anymore, depending on the book. But so if you get a meeting with 1 to 2 publishers, you've got a good book, because it's not easy to get a meeting with a publisher. And if you've got a meeting with 5 to 7 publishers, that means you've got a really great book. Maybe not a great book, but you've got a great idea for a book at least, right? And you still have to write the damn thing. And so right before, and what happens is, if you're taking your book out to the publishing world, you basically meet with people throughout the course of a week. You take all these publishing meetings, and all this ties back into your actual question.
Okay.
And so what happens is, throughout the week, you meet with all these publishers, or if it was 1 or if it was 2. But my agent pinged me ahead of time, and he said, and he broke down all these numbers for me. This wasn't my stuff. This was him. And he's one of the biggest agents in the world. And he's like, 5 to 7, you've got a really great book. And he's like, we already have meetings with 13 publishers. And by the end of the week, it'll probably get up to 18. Well, we ended up meeting with 19 publishers, and we broke a publishing record for the most publishers to ever bid on a book, fiction or nonfiction. Now, that's not on the power of Todd's massive celebrity and the fact that I've got more Instagram followers than The Rock, which I don't even have come close to it. But the thing was throughout that week, it was really interesting, because the publisher would say to me, why do you think there's so many other publishers that are interested in this book? And I said, and then they actually said, we think it's because it's never been written before. And I said, that's exactly it. It's never been written. But they said, why hasn't it been written before? And I said, because this particular concept, while it's known, people know about it. Cicero is the first person to actually coin the phrase alter ego back in 44 BC in a letter to a friend when he was unpacking his sort of success principles on life. And he talked about how the alter ego, really, it means the other I, or trusted friend within. And so when I said to the publishers, it's because most books that are written from the scope of research, someone who's been researching something, and there's some valuable stuff that can get out, someone's perspective on something, especially in this genre. But there are very few books that are actually written by real practitioners, the people that are on the field of play every single day, nose to nose, toes to toes, with whatever the problem or the concept is that they're working with someone on. And because I have now well over 18,000 hours of work one-on-one, like one-on-one, not counting all of the trainings I've done around the world or the keynote speeches, which would account for about 12,000 more hours. But that's a lot of hours working one-on-one and getting to see, in my world anyway, Olympic athletes, pro athletes. Now you get into public figures and entertainers and leaders around the world in a one-on-one setting, on like when you and I are like intimately talking and I'm talking with
Mm.
you, like what's really going on between the 6 inches of your ears? Like, what do you like? That was an amazing performance that you just had. Like, what was going on there? Um, in a group setting, you're not gonna divulge everything that you're saying, because sometimes it would sound super egotistical of you to say it that way, right? But that's what I
Mm.
want. I want to know, like, no, what are you really thinking about yourself in that moment? And if you say to me, which often comes up, I feel like I go into God mode. I go into
Mm.
God complex mode, which is one of the statements from one of the greatest soccer players of all time that I worked with. So I saw how this concept was being used by my most consistent and elite athletes. They would all say, I use another persona when I go out on the field, or I use another identity or a secret identity, or I have an alter ego. And this is back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And then I thought, after a while, after hearing it, I'm like, wait a second, this is an actual thing. It's not
Mm.
just an idea that, but no, this is something that we need to look into more. And so I became known as the alter ego guy, and that's the very specific thing that I was well known for building out athletes, is that performance identity to help them really perform to their capabilities and unshackle from the narrative of self-doubt that some people have, unshackle from the worries and the concerns of making mistakes, because when it's no longer attached to your identity,
Mm.
the mistake that you might make or the win that you might make, it's attached to this alter ego, you can actually play way more freely. And that was so that was sort of my journey into it, was starting this business back in 97 when coaching wasn't even a thing. That's a very, especially mental game coaching, that became something that happened a lot later. But it was something that resonated with me as well, because it's exactly what I did when I played sport. I had an alter ego when I played college football, and I was also a nationally ranked badminton player, oddly enough, as well. But I
What a
never took
pair.
Todd Herman out on the court. I always had this larger performance identity that went out there, and it allowed me to get into the zone in the flow state. And that was the most key part of this entire stuff, was how can I get all of my stuff out there on that court? And that's what happened.
Do you believe it to be a necessary prerequisite then for top performance? Or do you think
No,
there's some that don't have to have it?
yeah, no, I don't. It's that's one of the problems that I have with, I think, the personal development leadership world, is people will trot out an idea and they say, you have to do this or you're not going to be
Yeah.
successful. Of course, people have been successful in life without the employment of an alter ego. Um, Oftentimes, you'll find, in the way that I describe it in the book, the science of it, and just the different avenues and ways to get into an alter ego. People are using aspects of it. That's probably, I think, one of the things that you were referencing early on. You're like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Mm.
All I did was I took all of these sort of disparate ideas and I combined them into a very usable form that can be repeatable. It actually leverages the natural psychology of how your brain works. So no, but it is it's an extremely powerful tool to be able to use on, because when you know how to switch your identity, that is the ultimate trump card when it comes to performance. And I'm not saying because I'm the guy who's the purveyor of it. I'm saying identity switching, understanding you have many roles that you play in life. Right now, you're playing the role of the interested and the curious interviewer, right?
Mm.
But when you go into your Instagram feed and you're creating your amazing videos for people, that's you moving into promoter and presenter mode. It takes two different skills to operate in those roles, right?
Mm.
And then there's the you that shows up when you're with your family. There's the you that shows
Mm.
up when you're with your friends. There's the you that will show up when you're doing keynote speeches around the world. And when we start to understand that we have many sides of who we are, we can unshackle ourselves from this idea, which is fairly toxic now, that we have one personality. We
Yeah.
take a personality test and we say, oh, I'm an INTJ, I'm an introvert, or that's not the way that it works. That's not how
Mm.
you're not one thing. I've met so many introverts and I've challenged them on that label that they give themselves. I'm like, you're not an introvert, because here's what I know. Almost every single introvert that I know is a massive class clown and the funny person inside their own family. So that would tell me that you're not an introvert then.
Yeah.
That way. It's, and I mean, the world of personality tests and quizzes is such a massive, massive moneymaker, but they can be helpful in some ways. But just really see yourself as being, I've got many sides of myself, which means I've got many identities. This body encompasses many identities. And when I know how to shift identities quickly based on the context of what I'm going after or the role that I'm playing, that's when you really unleash the governor on your life, your performance, and you can move away from judging yourself by like, oh, this really isn't me. Here's my challenge, people. You don't really know who you are. Like, I'm literally the global expert on this thing, and I never even worry about whether or not I know all of myself. I'm extremely self-aware, but I think my life is about just discovery and unfolding and see what more can I find out about what I'm capable of. And alter egos are a tool that I can use to help make that happen with myself and others.
You reference it slightly there on the fact of self-awareness. So do you feel like self-awareness has its limitations in the fact that you are constantly searching for who you are, but it's almost a carrot that you can never get to? It's always in front of you because you're always chasing it.
Yeah, so it's such a great point. Gary Vaynerchuk and I have talked about this. His office in New York City and my office in New York City are literally like right next to each other.
Oh, okay.
And we've spoken at lots of events together, and you know, I've gone and done some, you know, workshops with his team, and, you know, learning from them because they're just masters at what they do. And we both have an agreement on, I think self-awareness is one of the great superpowers of life. Knowing your limitations, knowing what triggers sort of energy depletion, you know, knowing what your natural interests are and where you want to move towards, your inclinations to kind of want to investigate something, is a real superpower. However, I don't think that I'm ever at the point where I'll be completely ever 100% self-aware about myself, and I'm not concerned about that. My only concern is that, am I on a weekly basis pursuing growth and discovery, curious to find out what I'm made of, what I can do, what I can build? That's, I think, a healthier way of looking at it. So it's not so much a carrot that I can never reach. I'm fine with that. It's like leadership. You're never done learning leadership skills. You're never done learning communication skills. That's not a goal. That is just a pursuit in life that you have. I always want to get better at being a better communicator, articulating myself, being a better storyteller to someone, knowing how to connect with someone else, and, you know, ask better questions. That's just always a pursuit. So I think self-awareness is one of those ideas too. Don't make it a goal. Make it just a pursuit that you're always curious about what you are made of.
Definitely. And then create a system around that where I guess the alter ego is there to help you in that pursuit, in the sense that it takes the emotional baggage off it, if that's the case. Because
sorry, go ahead and finish your thought.
Yeah, no, all I was going to say is the fact that because the issue is what I've found with myself and a lot of people who, for instance, if you look in the content creation space, a lot of people fear content creation because they feel like people are judging them as an individual for the content they're putting out.
Yeah.
But once you take yourself away and you create a new personality, and you're like, well, that's just that person. They're not saying that about me. They're just saying about that person and that character.
Yeah. And in chapter 2 of the book, the very beginning story I unpack in that one, from an acquaintance, Shep Gordon, who's widely known as one of the greatest managers in kind of entertainment, specifically music history. He actually invented the celebrity chef movement, which was amazing. It all happened, and Shep is an amazing storyteller, but it all happened at Wolfgang Puck's restaurant in like 1992, I think it was, in LA, when they all basically came to him for help, and he invented this celebrity chef movement. Anyway, at the start of the chapter 2, I unpack how when we were both speaking at an event together, and someone asked him a question of, hey, Shep, like, you've worked with Alice Cooper, you've worked with Teddy Pendergrass, you've worked with, Matchbox 20 and on and on and on, all these like, big time stars throughout the years, for the last 50 years. How did you keep them performing at like peak levels? Which was an interesting question. So I'm like leaning forward because that's my world. I'm like, oh, I'd love to hear what Shep says here. And he said, oh, that's easy. The very first thing that we did was we built out their alter ego and their persona so that when they come off the stage or when they're out in the world, they understand that when people come to them and they say, oh my God, I love you so much, you know that really what they're saying is they love the stage persona guy. They don't know you. Also, when Rolling Stone magazine writes about you, or insert the name of any other entertainment publication, and nowadays social media, what they're critiquing and what they're commenting on is that character, not the whole human being. And that was one of the key parts of this process for me, of like helping individuals develop their mental toughness, their emotional resiliency, which are extraordinarily important, and probably even far more important now than ever before because of just the massive toxicity that my clients have to deal with when they get done playing their game. They get on social media and there's 36,000 tweets sometimes waiting for them, telling them that they're, but this is just real. You're a piece of shit. I hope you die. Like, it's incredibly hurtful, painful stuff. But bifurcating that person's identity and allowing that, individual to sort of take the proverbial heat, it's like putting up a shield to the self. Like it protects the more soft parts of all of us from being attacked that way. So 100%. It's
that
so
was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask, actually, and you brought it up, was the fact that how is it transitioned, the alter ego, from when you came up with the concept to how it is now in society and the way you view it? Because the way I see the environment at the moment, especially with athletes, like you said, it's like they're done with the game and they have to sit and answer questions. Like I remember one of the first sort of exposure that I got for the alter ego was when watching Tiger back in the early 2000s, because I'm a big golf fan. So he always talks about the zone and getting into the zone. I watched a documentary of him in the British Open in the early 2000s, and he's just 4 days of just pure zone, like at St Andrews. And it was that in and then as you transition now, they are so exposed on social media, and there's a lot of kickback to that at the moment. So how has your approach to talking about the alter ego changed over time with the rise of different technologies and exposures for athletes?
Well, okay, so going back, 2003 was when I actually started training people on the employment of this new tool, using the actual alter ego, like the method that I end up unpacking inside the book. So there's, the book is called The Alter Ego Effect. And the reason we call it the effect and not the alter ego method, and it was funny because my agent was like, I think we need to call it the alter ego method. And I'm like, no. The whole value proposition of this thing is, no, there's an effect of using an alter ego, which is counterintuitive, because nowadays the word authenticity and authentic self are these huge terms that people use, or that they're in my view, a lot of people are actually trapped by it, because it goes back to that point of self-awareness. Like, listen, most of us don't even know what our authentic self even is yet, because we haven't exposed ourselves to enough opportunity or a conflict or challenge yet. And so they get trapped by some of these ideas that become memes in society. And so it's because the alter ego is nothing about being inauthentic. It's actually about allowing the most real version of your capabilities to come out. Because I would actually challenge people that, like, if you're hanging out with your buddies and someone comes into your crew when you're having a pint at the pub or something like that, and someone says a cutting comment or a negative comment or makes fun of a friend, and in that moment you don't say what you want to say, like you had it, but you didn't confront the person. I talk about how the most honest place in your home is your pillow. The pillow is the most honest place in anybody's home, because it's the place where when you rest your head at night, you do a recall of the day's events. And you will either beat yourself up for the actions you didn't take, the intentions that you had but you didn't follow through on, or the values that you have as a human being, your character traits, and you didn't enact them in a moment. You didn't speak up when the boss had an opportunity asking for feedback on something, and you had an idea but you didn't say it because you sort of shrunk into this idea of, oh, I'm an introvert, or I'm quiet, or, you know, this is a subject matter or a discipline that's outside of my purview kind of thing. So who's going to listen to me? Like, no, like that's where you beat yourself up. And so instead, if I can get people to the end of their day, and I call it the smiling pillow effect, if I can have you smiling because you showed up the way that you wanted to show up, and you used whatever device was available to you, I don't care if it was an alter ego or you just showed up that way, that's important to me, because that's a win. It's what I call confidence chips. It's like poker chips. You just stacked one on your deck that day. And when you have a stack of confidence chips sitting in front of you, you're going to play bigger at life. And so the
you
method
build momentum.
What's that?
I said, and you build momentum, which is
massive.
By far the most crucial thing.
It is so important. Yeah, it's so important. Momentum before even confidence. People talk about confidence a lot, and I'm like, no, listen, momentum comes first, because when you've got momentum, that's that in sport, that's a dangerous athlete, because now all of a sudden an average athlete with momentum is actually leveled the playing field against someone who could be more superior, because it builds belief and confidence. And when belief and confidence plus momentum are mixed together, that equals certainty. And when you've got someone who's certain that they can make something happen, I mean, there is an alignment. I get chills every time because I love seeing it. There's an alignment between the mental, emotional, and physical body, which now culminates into results on the field, which look uncommon to that person. So, but just back to your question about how has this all developed and changed? I was going back and talking about the alter ego effect. It's an effect because what it does is it actually draws out of you the most real version of you, which sounds counterintuitive. Really, I'm going to step into an alter ego. And the one easy one I say to people is, at least over here in North America, Halloween is a big thing. And Halloween, I feel, is like my favorite day of the year, because it's the day that everybody else comes and joins my party, because I'm a massive people person.
Mr. Halloween.
No problems being around human beings. I can do interviews like this all day for 10 hours, and I will have zero drain of energy at the end. I'll just be as excited on, the 10th hour as I was on hour 1. And so you take a look at someone who's wearing a Halloween costume. Do they act a little bit different? Do they act a little bit more gregarious? Do they act a little bit more playful or something like that? Yes, and that's the secret of the alter ego. What it does is allow someone to be a little bit more playful, a little bit more free. And when you have someone activating playfulness, which is actually a quality of 6-month-old kids to 7 years of age, playfulness starts to activate scientifically. You've got beta, alpha, theta, and delta brainwave states. So beta is the waking mind. It's where the frontal lobe part of the brain is super active. It's reasoning, it's judging. The alpha brain is where we're starting to get into focus. Okay, not flow state, not the zone, but focus, deep focus. A lot of times, theta is true flow state, true zone state. Children from the ages of 6 months to 7 years of age are most caught in theta brainwave. Well, functionally, it's important because that's the part of your life where you consume and absorb like a sponge the most knowledge around how the world works. Okay. Then at the age of 7 for girls, 8.5, 9 for boys, the frontal lobe really starts to activate and build up. And that's where you get able to reason and judge. Also, children that are 7 years and younger, they have no concept of me and I. There's no identity that they have. That's something that you learn over time. All these things are important. I want to unpack these because they're all important for you to understand why the power of this is so incredible. So children are activated in playfulness throughout 6 months to 7 years of age. Playfulness is associated with the theta brainwave state. The theta brainwave state is where the zone and the flow state is. So if you're someone who wants to get into the zone and flow state, which is what we've experienced when we feel like all of our capabilities comes out of us, well, I want to back that up and go, well, how can I get you to be more playful? Because it is the ultimate golden key to unlocking this mysterious world called the zone. Well, the way to do that is to disassociate from your identity. That's one way to do it, so that we don't take ourselves so seriously. And instead, it's Super Richard that shows up here. which is what my alter ego was when I started in business. To disassociate from the fact that I looked like I was 12 years old when I started. Who's going to believe me when I stand on stage talking about mental toughness or mental game or, the psychology of how the brain works? I don't have 7 degrees behind my name and 9 letters. I don't have 4 best-selling books. All these rules in my head about what I needed to have before I could be an authority on this thing. But the reality was I was really good at working with young kids. I wasn't working with pro athletes at the time. I was working with 13, 14, 15-year-old kids. And I was really good at it, not because I had amazing skills, honestly. It was because I just cared way more than other people. I heard a sports psychologist walk into a room of a bunch of hockey kids in Canada where I started. And the very start of her speech was, I don't normally do this because I don't like talking to kids. I don't really like working with kids. But I'm here today to talk to you all about sports psychology. Well, you think about losing an entire audience right off the bat, them being told that she doesn't like them. And I
Especially
thought to myself,
kids.
this is super early in my career. I was like, oh, it's going to be really easy to win in business, I think, because more people are like her. They don't care. They're just doing this because it's, the degree that they went and got or whatever the case is. So the method changed a lot over the years as it developed. And as I learned more about linking, okay, well, this brain processing that happens over here, it actually activates this one side of what an alter ego will do if you employ it, or I'll tweak it slightly to make sure that it's mapping towards just the inner psychological switches that work with human beings. And in the book, I talk about many of them, enclosed cognition being one of them.
I think it'd be good now to transition into how does one create an alter ego? I know you talk about it in depth in the book, but for anyone listening that just wants to sort of like a little short introduction to creating your own, and then I have some follow-up questions based on that. But I think it'd be good to give an introduction to how does one go about creating.
Yeah. So we'll do the what's called the Cliff's Notes version, or the you go to the smartest kid in your class and you duck in the hallway and you're like, okay, can you just tell me what's going to be on the test here? So there's kind of the useful way to think about it, even though there's maybe more steps inside the book. There's sort of 5 key processes that we're going through. Step 1, or steps. Step 1 is, first thing we want to do is just identify what area of your life are you the most dissatisfied with right now. Okay, that can be one way of getting into this. What's one area of your life that you're most dissatisfied with? And it could be because you're not showing up like you most want to. All right. So in your case, I'm sure you've got a lot of people who follow you because you're really prolific with the content that you produce. You have a consistent schedule, you get it out, and it's there. Now, after getting to know you a little bit over the last little while, I'm guessing on that there's probably a lot of resistance for you to be doing that when you first started. Yes or no?
Of course. Of course.
And I think I'd be curious on how long did you wait before you started publishing, when you actually had the idea that you wanted to go do this?
Is this book talk today?
Yeah, well, whether it's Book Talk Today or it's your Instagram profile.
It's funny because I actually had the idea for the podcast before the book reviews.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was interesting because a lot of people think, oh, this podcast thing where so I've always wanted to speak with authors.
Yeah.
But I never really had that. Do you know when you said that you were like speaking and you were like, you needed all these credentials? I felt like I needed all these credentials.
Yeah.
Before approaching anyone, because I'm like, why would anyone want to speak to me? Who am I, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I kind of created, thinking about it now, I kind of created the alter ego of the guy who talks about books, which then allowed me to transition into this, which I feel like is more my personality rather than perhaps someone who, obviously the reviews and stuff are great, but I love speaking to people about books and ideas. So
yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, by the way, if you need an intro to any author, I mean, I know pretty much most of them. Because I run an author's mastermind as well with some of the biggest authors on the planet. And
oh, do you?
Oh yeah, yeah. We get together and we share ideas on like our writing process, our research process, launching process. Like big wins that we have going forward, like after the book launch, on what we're doing daily, weekly, monthly to continue to propel the book sales and stuff. Like that's what a lot of people sit back and they're like, oh, that guy's selling like tens of thousands or hundreds. And I mean, and that's a very rare author, because people have to realize that the average book only sells 250 to 400 copies. That's the average book. And so everyone that's in this group that I have is all like New York Times or Wall Street Journal or whatever bestseller books. And they have good books. But yeah, if you want an introduction to anybody, just
Yeah, definitely.
happy to help
Definitely,
you.
we'll speak about that.
But you're a good example there. Like, and it's a good lesson for other people that are listening, because, you know, I just talked about how I was super insecure about how young I looked and I didn't have all these letters behind my name when I started back in '97. And you just talked about how, you know, same thing, who's gonna talk to me about blah because I don't have, you know, credentials or whatever. But in experiencing you, the thing that, and that's why I'm offering help, is because you're a good human being. You know, and that's what you're always going to find amongst the people that are at the top of almost all games. They really just resonate with people who are good human beings, and they are good human beings as well. It's one of the great kind of misconceptions about someone who might have, quote, made it, that they wouldn't have time for you. I think the people who are most generous with their time are the ones that are at the pinnacle of their, you know, discipline, their field, whatever that might be. And yet most people just don't reach out to us, because again, they build a story in their head.
Yeah.
And you can tell really quickly right away, like who's genuine, like who's like, has good character. Because I get pitched every single day on Instagram on, let me blow up your Instagram profile, and, you know, they drop names and I know the names that they drop, and so I'll ping them and say, hey, do you actually work with this person? They're like, never heard of this person in my life. So anyway, went off in the tangent there. What was the original question that we were talking about?
Sorry, you were going through the process of the alter ego.
Yeah, sorry, yes.
You were on the
Okay.
step
So
one,
step
and
one.
then
What's that area of your life that you might be most frustrated with? Okay, that you're not showing up like you want to. Maybe it's sales for you. Maybe it's promotion because you're trying to promote a channel, or you're not diving into your business if it's a startup like you should be and committing to it. Conversely, another way is, what area of your life or role do you play? A role for me is dad. I've got 3 little kids. So that's a role that I have in my life, is dad. And so what area of your life would you like to be more playful with? To not take yourself so seriously inside of it. So that's step one. Find one of those, because you don't build an alter ego for your life. It's always in context to a specific role or an area, or what I call in our world a field of play that you go and you compete on or you play on and stuff.
So on that point, sorry to interrupt you, but that was actually one of the questions I want to ask. Now you've sort of going through the process, I think it would be good just to stop and just ask the question. On that point, one thing that I was thinking of, and one thing that I wanted to ask you was, do you create an alter ego for each situation which you deem necessary? Or do you just create one for the one that you want to focus on solely? Can you have multiple for multiple different areas of play, fields of play, as you say?
100%.
Or do you just have one that you focus on at one time?
So I would say, as a starter kit for people, pick one to start playing with, to start getting accustomed with. And the reason is because, and I say this in the book, and you said this at the very beginning, alter egos have been around for a long time. We're talking, they were first phrased, 2,065 years ago in 44 BC by Cicero. So they've been around, but there is no method and that's what I was working on in the very beginning. I was interviewing all my athletes who kept on bringing up their persona. I went back to all of them and I said, okay, well, how do you get into your process? Because here's what I did. And then you're finding these commonalities amongst everybody. But like you had said at the very beginning, it's like you felt like when you're reading the book, like, oh, this makes so much sense, or, oh, I think I've done this before, or I have been doing this before. That's my favorite part, because I tell people I didn't invent alter egos. Yes, I invented a method to how to, consistently and systematically and repeatedly get into it. But the great thing about it is every single person that's listening to this has already done it. Yeah. Because we do it as children automatically. we try on different personas. We put on a Superman cape or a Batman cape or a mask, or we jump off the sofa as Black Panther or holding a Thor hammer or whatever things, or we play nurse or house or teacher with our siblings and stuff. And that's just us trying on. It's actually a fast path to learning skill development, because you're actually stepping in and embodying the character, which in your mind already has the characteristics, which then just streamlines the onboarding process of learning the skill. So you already know this, but I would say pick one area, start there, but you can have it in multiple areas. So one of my clients, for example, he's a CEO of a big investment company in New York City, and he has his CEO alter ego, because the reality is he's a terrible leader. He's a great leader of himself, like billionaire plus, but he was overbearing, domineering, a bit toxic. Okay, and so
sorry to interrupt you, but is this through his experience, or is this through someone telling him?
No, that's me telling him. Well, he knew it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, when I tell you something about you, you already know it to be true. Like, you kind of already feel it. But I was like, and that was why he hired me, because I met him actually at a charity event in New York City, and he just said something rude, and I just called him an asshole for saying it. And then his assistant, his right-hand person, said, "Don't you ever talk to him that way." And I'm like, "Listen, I'll talk to anybody the way that I want to talk to anybody. But if someone's being an asshole, they're being an asshole." And I'm going to say, I'm a farm kid from Western Canada. None of you people impress me. Like, no one impresses me. I work with some of the, the athletes that you see on Sky Sports or ESPN Highlights of the Night. I work with them. Like, celebrity doesn't impress me, or neither does, dollars in your bank account. That doesn't impress me. What impresses me is how you treat other people, really. And so anyways, he leaned in and he's like, "You're a guy I want to talk to." So, because he had nothing but yes people around him.
Yeah.
But sorry, just to wrap up the story. So we built out an alter ego as him, as the leader of his people that he steps into. Like, he is custom built to help him win with his work that he does. Like, he's a beast at it. But when it comes to people management, terrible. So we built out an alter ego there. And then that level of toxicity also carried over into his family life as a dad. So we built out an alter ego in that area too, inspired by someone else. They're both inspired by different people. The CEO, leader type person, inspired by a different character than the one that's over in Dadville type of thing. So absolutely, like, you can have multiple alter egos, which is just really you being very intentional about how you want to show up. And all it is, I've got Superman behind me on the video, if you're watching the video. And he's there because he's one of the characters that's a part of one of my alter egos, Super Richard. And it's there as a totem. It's there as an artifact. It's environmentally. I mean, when I'm doing video all day long, I always see him behind me, and he's always there watching me to see if I'm truly embodying the characteristics that I say that I want to bring into these moments that I have that are important to me. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah,
definitely makes sense.
And even my friend like Jay Shetty, who was a super big promoter of the book. I think we've done like 2 different podcasts on his show about it, and he's done one separately just about, the concept itself. Even him in his studio, he has a bunch of photographs behind him, which look nice to someone else, but really they're a part of his tribe of mentors in his own mind, which is, again, using the alter ego in a bit of a different way. But when I said that Superman is behind me to watch me, just as Joseph Campbell is, just as Winston Churchill is, just as Mr. Rogers is, and Mr. Rogers is my alter ego that I use, who's very popular over in North America, at least. A lot of other people know who he might be, but he's one of the greatest children's entertainers of all time. He's the inspiration for how I want to show up for my kids. Fun, kind, playful, patient, creative. That's what I should be with my kids. Not the challenger personality type that comes on podcasts or works with like elite people, because it'd be very easy for me to get the idea that that's who I am, because I flex that habit of identity every day for 8 to 10 hours. But that's not who I am. That's not all of who I am. I also have the capacity to be patient and kind and loving and creative And that's what I want my children to experience when they're around me, is that guy.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
That definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
That definitely makes sense.
So again, step one was what area of your life. Step two is now just take a quick little inventory on what is it about how you're showing up in that area that you don't like, that that you feel is shackling you back. And it's important to get honest with yourself about it. We don't have to go deep on it, but just like, is there 5 things? Like, what are the traits that you're not bringing to it? You're not taking action. Okay, so step 3 of the process then is just basically a flip of what you just unpacked in step number 2, like what you're frustrated with or what you don't like about how you show up, or maybe the traits that you're bringing to the table. Now you just go to, well, how do you want to show up in those instances? And so, for example, like me, when I built Super Richard, when I first started out in business, when I was like super insecure about how young I looked and wasn't taking action the way that I was intending to each day, and I wasn't very articulate in, explaining to people what I did. Well, I wanted to be more articulate then. I wanted to take the action that I said I was going to take and not hide behind the worry of rejection and resistance and judgment and worry and doubt. And I wanted to be just more confident. And so for me, instead of going to like one source of inspiration, because I'd had so much experience using an alter ego when I played sport, I used a combination of Superman, that take action attitude. Like it's almost like, Nike has the slogan of just do it. Superman was the man of action, right? Plus he was the man of steel. So he had that sort of natural defense mechanism against, the worries and the judgments of others. Joseph Campbell, who was a hero of mine, wrote some of the greatest books ever written on the power of myth and the hero's journey model that he created. And then Benjamin Franklin was always a long time, hero of mine in that. And he's a great example of someone who reinvented himself over and over and over and over and over again. And he even used an alter ego to write initially his first words, which was I think it was Charles Dogood letters that he would submit to a newspaper. So those are my inspiration. And then I went out and I did step number 4. So step 3 was unpacking, what are the traits that I want, who already has them. So I have a model in my mind of what I'm trying to reach for. Because again, what people need to remember, about 70% of our brain is dedicated to the visual cortex. That's why the alter ego is such a powerful reference point, because it builds a model now in our mind of what we're trying to work towards. And that isn't becoming a second-rate copy of someone else. All these things that people are so concerned about. And it's like, listen, if I become a second-rate copy of someone else, I'll figure it out along the way. But at least I'm taking action. At least I'm discovering what's working and not working. People place all these rules around life that just are not practically true. And when you really get down and are able to sit around extraordinarily successful people that have achieved just, mountainous peaks, they'll talk about just like what they like. Just it's so interesting to read their journey. And that's why I actually suggest to people, and I don't know how much you do this on your channel, but I would encourage people to read way more biography or autobiography books than they do even self-help books, because biographies, you get to the real meat, and you get to see the real journey that someone went on, and it humanizes them, and it breaks down this wall of just something that's unpacked in a couple of chapters in someone's nonfiction book about their successes.
It was interesting enough because I was talking to you about the individual that I had on recently, earlier on today, and he wrote a leadership book, but he was a CFO of a bank in Syria during the Syrian crisis.
Oh, wow.
And I was talking to him saying that you can read the best leadership book you want by someone who's been from a management school, but he's on the ground in Syria, buildings getting hit with mortar bombs and trying to run a bank and still making it profitable and good for your clients. So I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah, and that's why I say I really encourage people, and it's okay to read like books that are written by, researchers. But just the problem with research is you're not on the field. You're not actually seeing what people are doing. You're hearing what people want you to say or want you to see, but not what they're really doing in the quiet depths of their mind. And it's a very different world, and it's a lot more gray, a lot more dark sometimes that people don't realize. Like I encourage people to learn how to use the dark energy of life, right? Like I've got a client who plays on the PGA. And you would have never guessed this, but the thing that helps to activate his peak performance when he's in that about 25 seconds of lead up to the shot and then
Yeah.
executing the shot is rage. Deep levels of rage. Rage can be a powerful focuser of attention. Now, he's not walking on the course the entire time in rage, but we have developed a way for him to step into that rage when he needs to, because for him, it just works just unbelievably well. And now
Yeah.
it's such a positive because it was an emotion that he was really rebelling against because it came from some of the stuff that happened to him as a kid. And now he's learned to own it. And just his level of self-confidence is just it's amazing to watch his maturation process. So I said, okay, I've got these three alter egos now, inspired to create this one called Super Richard, which gets to the fourth phase, which is naming it, claiming it, and using a totem, artifact, or uniform to step into it. So for me, what I went out, so I called it Super Richard. Richard's my actual first name. I've always gone by Todd, so it's Richard Todd Herman. But Richard, when I was 21 and looked fresh faced at 12, I was like, Richard just sounds more professional, so I'm going to go with Richard than Todd. And so Super Richard, inspired from the name Superman. And so that was the name. Naming is important because it creates form and substance in the mind. The moment you name something, you can actually work with it now. Like when something is just that voice in your head, and it's the negative voice in your head, the first thing I encourage people to do, give it a name so you can talk to it, talk back to it. It pulls it out of the shadows. The scariest part of any horror film is what? The first 45 minutes to 60 minutes when we don't know what the thing is that's lurking around the corner. And then the moment it comes around the corner, you're like, oh, that's what it looks like. Now I know what to kill it with.
Yeah.
Um, and then the second one, like I said, was the uniform, the totem, the artifact. And I highly recommend people use something that you can wear. So I used glasses. I went and bought a pair of non-prescription glasses. Back when wearing glasses wasn't the cool thing to do. Everyone's getting LASIK eye surgery, but I went and bought a pair of non-prescription glasses. And it was sort of paying homage to that idea of Superman Clark Kent. He put on the glasses to become the mild-mannered Clark Kent that would be accepted by society, which was actually his alter ego, because the real version of Superman, Kal-El, had all these capabilities.
Yeah.
And that's what I sort of posit to people is the real version of you don't even know yet. The alter ego, that's why in the book in chapter number 3, I talk about unlocking the hero within. The alter ego is the mechanism to help make that happen. So you show up more heroically each day. And so I bought a pair of non-prescription glasses, and that's what I put on. I put on my glasses to step into Super Richard to become more decisive, articulate, and confident so that I could make the calls that I wanted to make in order to grow my little fledgling sports business. And then 6 months later, I just got off the phone. I'll never forget this. I just got off the phone. I booked 2 really kind of good gigs for myself. It was going to be good money and it was going to be good exposure. And I looked down and my glasses were sitting on the table. And it gets to this quote that I share in the book from Cary Grant, the great Hollywood golden era actor who's like good looking, debonair, charismatic. I was from Bristol, England. Grew up in a single family home, just one mom, very poor. But he had these aspirations to really go and make something of himself and, make it in Hollywood. But he really battled with mental health stuff throughout his entire life, depression, anxiety, stress disorders and stuff. And someone was interviewing him about his career later in life, right before he passed away, actually. And he said, I created Cary Grant, the one that all of you know. I pretended to be somebody I wanted to be, and I finally became that person, or he became me. But at some point, we met.
It merged.
And that's what ends up happening. People say, well, how long do you have to use an alter ego for? I'm like, there's no rules on this. You use it until you get to the place where something feels comfortable for you now. You just burst through and you see yourself in a new way. You've now created a new identity for yourself. You see yourself differently now all of a sudden. You associate with yourself differently. And that's what happened. I looked down, my glasses were gone, and I was like, I merged. The person I wanted to become, which was more confident, articulate, and decisive, I'm now him each day. And then what I did is I went back and I reinvented, my alter ego again. Like what's the next phase for me? Like who's the next source of inspiration that I could use? Because maybe something you have to retire. It's exactly what Beyonce did when she retired Sasha Fierce. Sasha Fierce finally got her out on stage and to perform provocatively and with such effusion of energy. She didn't need her anymore, but it got her there, right? And some people go, oh, that was you being fake then. It's like they don't understand the psychology of what it's like to be a human being in a difficult world. Things are struggles. Things are hard. right? Like it's not popsicles, rainbows, and butterflies all the time. Rarely is it ever, actually, especially when you're someone who's ambitious.
Mm.
So, don't take yourself so seriously. Don't think that the labels, the narrative that you have about yourself is you, because it's not. You don't even know yourself yet. And so now we get to step 5, which is the actual, activating this, being very intentional. So where does this identity show up? Again, it goes back to step number 1. It's sort of like a circle, right?
Yeah.
You decided the field of play or the role that you want, and now how do you activate it? How do you step into it? Is there a trigger like there was for me when I'd put on these glasses? Like even the act when these arms of the glasses, still to this day, it's like there's an on-off switch next to my ear, and when those glasses or those arms of them go past
The music
there,
comes on.
it's a switch. It's a switch, like, and I can't turn it off now. It's just, I can feel like it's such a transformational device that it's fun to see people play with it. That's for me. So that's kind of like your 5 steps, but we have it all in the book along with some other stuff. And really the science behind it. Cause I think it's important for me because of my company. We run a very science-backed company. We want to explain to people, why does this work so well? It's not just some, cool tool that people like Halsey or, David Bowie or Beyonce or insert the name of like hundreds and thousands of other people that I do in the book when I name them. But, it's super accessible for all of us.
Definitely. The most contemporary example that I found when reading the book recently, when reading another book, was Goggins in Can't Hurt Me, where he's like, he just created Goggins.
Yeah. And it's funny because over here in North America, at least, when I go into bookstores, it's fun because his book is sitting next to mine. Oftentimes, like they kind of come hand in hand. And then someone sent me a screenshot of like his big Facebook community, and I've gotten lots since where people are like, so Goggins is going to inspire you just through his own story, about, how to show up in life, and what he calls callousing the mind. And, even our family, you could ask my daughter, Molly, what are Hermans like? And she'll say, we do tough stuff. That's what Hermans do. We lift heavy things. And I want to ingrain that in my young kids that no, we don't shy away from this stuff. We do tough stuff. So people would say like Goggins inspires you with like this powerful story. And then this book gives you the actual process for how you can go and do it for yourself. But Goggins is a great contemporary example. Another one that I would say for people to look at is James Lawrence. He's known as the Iron Cowboy. That's his his alter ego name.
I haven't heard of him.
He's incredible because he did 50 triathlons in 50 days in 50 states. So every state, a new triathlon. Completed it and went to the next state. And so he's a great example. There's so many. Halsey is a good example. Halsey, the great, pop singer right now. And when you actually look at her name, her real name is Ashley, but there's lots of different stories that she has out there about why she created Halsey. And it's because she said, listen, I grew up in a tough environment. And I just couldn't see Ashley going out and doing this. The Ashley that was created to that point, I just couldn't see Ashley doing it, so I created Halsey. And Halsey is just simply a flip of a couple of letters in her name, right? And but it's funny because I get pinged every single day by people on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram going, oh my God, did you read this article? Or did you see this? Or, did you see that? And I can't stop seeing the concept of alter egos everywhere I go. People are like, even athletes in press conferences, they'll make an allusion to it without actually naming it. So it's fun. I just think it's one of these, I'm sure you've learned a lot about mental models over the years of you reading and, being such a having such a voracious appetite for knowledge. And this is one of those useful mental models that you hang up, that you use, because when you learn to change your identity quickly, it is just such a trump card when it comes to personal development, because while other people talk about habits, which of course are valuable, and then some people talk about changing your beliefs. The problem when you hear someone say, you know what, it sounds like you got a belief issue. We are trained over the last 100 years to know that when you've got a belief issue, that means it's hard. It's difficult to change a belief issue. But what do habits, beliefs, behaviors all stack on top of? Your identity. And so when you change your identity, You've now just automatically changed habits, beliefs, attitudes, behaviors, because they all stack on top of an identity. When you step into Superman, you're automatic. And again, that's only if you resonate with Superman. The trick with this stuff, this is my final tip for everyone, is only use the source code, the inspiration of an alter ego from someone, something, can be an animal as well, it can be an inanimate object of something that you resonate with. That's why I can't sell an alter ego off the shelf, like the shelf you've got behind you. I can't do it because some people's alter egos and what they're inspired by is very personal to them. So just make sure that you connect to it, because when you do, bets are off at how fast you can make a shift happen.
That's a great way to end it. Todd, thank you so much for coming on and speaking and talking about your book, Alter Ego, The Power of Secret Identities to Transform Your Life. Todd, I really appreciate you taking the time. Where's the best place for people to find you and learn more?
Yes, so my home base on the interwebs is toddherman.me. And that's where people can see all the different companies and training programs that we've got available for people. And then if people want more information about the book itself, alteregoeffect.com. There's some videos there. I also have my children's book up there as well for people who are listening and they got little ones. It came out a year after my other book. It's called My Super Me, and it's been a huge hit. And it's basically just walking kids through, how they can sort of find some inspiration to help them find the courage to do tough stuff too.
That's great. Thanks, Todd.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. Also, visit our website, www.booktalktoday.com, to subscribe and download the latest edition of our magazine. Join our mailing list to receive the first issue for free to get a taste for the value-packed content that we are offering. Book Talk Today, for readers, by readers.